Welcome to the Legacy Art Gallery on December 7th for our artist talk. It's nice to see the audience here today. And we are going to be interviewing Santa Barbara visual artists Tricia Evenson and Stan Evenson, and with a select questions about their art and their artist journey. We are Santa Barbara visual artists, and we're a group of about 50 that like to do gallery exhibitions in Santa Barbara, downtown State Street, and up at LaCumber. We have about 18 artists involved in this particular November-December exhibition. So my first question, Tricia, is when did you first know you wanted to pursue a career in the arts?
Probably about age 14. I always knew that I wanted to be an artist. I had some other aspirations of being a scientist, like a marine biologist, but I was very involved with art, and then around that time we had an apartment over our garage, and an art center student was renting it. And so I got to watch some of his process and some of the projects he was working on, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. So that was my very first inspiration. And I was always involved with art projects, and I was a calligrapher in high school, and I worked on the yearbook, and was the one that people would come to me and say, can you help me with a poster? Can you help me with my visual aid project for school? So that was kind of, I was already like leaning in toward being an artist or a designer.
A natural characteristic of being interested in the arts.
Yes, definitely.
Yes,
and it came early. My mother was an artist too. She was an illustrator and a painter, not professionally, but she did a lot of beautiful paintings that she put in galleries, but the illustration she didn't do professionally. But she had this amazing ability to conceptualize and just from head to hand be able to draw. I didn't get that gift from her. But she was always had a hand in the creative process, and I think that was a heavy influence also.
All right, Stan, same question. When did you find that you were involved in the arts?
Well, I always have loved art from the get-go. My influences were, when I was little, was Mad Magazine, and I just remember in 7th grade at the bus stop, this one friend of mine was drawing Big Daddy Roth, rat fink on binders and making money on it. And it's just, I didn't take that up, but I definitely started drawing. And it was probably in my junior year in high school, 1968, when I had an unbelievable opportunity with Ralph Goings, and someone has to look this up, Ralph Goings, Goings, and he's passed away. He was probably died with a paintbrush in his hand at 87 years old. But he was a hyper-realist, and I had this person before he was discovered as a junior in high school, so that was just kind of elevated me. And it was probably, I never thought it could turn into a profession until I finally took a commercial art class in a community college. And I was taking all these fine art classes, and it's just like, they had an art center catalog out there that says, where's that? Okay, I want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it started.
Yes, and it's the natural interest and ability that you already have, just through your heart and spirit. Yeah. Well, how did you two meet and come together with your art?
Well, first let me back up a little bit. It's ironic, but we both went to the same school. Different campuses and different eras. So when did you start at Art Center?
1971.
1971, and I started about 10 years later at the campus in Pasadena. And Stan has a really robust career that preceded, and I think you should talk a little bit about that, and then we can jump to how we met.
Well, I had an opportunity when I left Art Center that one of my professors was Roland Young, and he was also the creative director of A&M Records.
Mhm.
And so I got hired pretty quickly out of school to work at A&M Records, and that's, to me, a dream job. 22 years old, 23, and going out and designing these 12 by 12 formats with gatefolds. And it's just like, oh my God, pinch me. How did I get this, land this thing? And it was really, that's how I started. And when I was at A&M, it didn't take me very long to see that I really didn't want to work for the man. And it wasn't Roland and the creative services, it was hierarchy above that. I just didn't feel like that was my calling. And so I just went to Roland and I said, I'm unhappy. He says, why don't you go out on your own? I said, what? And I said, okay. So I started my business in 1974 at 24 years old. Yeah. And you want to take over in 1989?
Then I came to work for Stan in 1989. I had been working as a designer at another agency, and then I left that company, and this is before we had the internet. So my sources of knowing who to go see were limited, but there was one book that was circulating in Los Angeles. It was Los Angeles Graphic Design. It was like the Bible of design, like who's who in LA. And Stan's company was featured in that, so he was top of my list. And I went and interviewed, and
I should probably take over here.
yes,
Because at that time, I remember that I was really busy when Tricia came in, and I just asked my senior designer, I said, can you handle this? And I hadn't gone out to meet her at all. And this gentleman came back, my senior designer, and laid the portfolio on my desk. And I started going through it, and it's just like, wow. Wow, 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 wow. And it just kept on. I said, I gotta meet this person. So I went out into the lobby, and Tricia's out there, and I said, this is an amazing portfolio. And anyway, she was hired within a month, full time.
I started freelancing initially, and the job that what I was most involved in was to develop the Evenson Design Group portfolio. So that was meant working with the photographer and doing all the art direction of the shots, doing the styling of the shots, creating a whole system of images. Back then it was in 35mm slides. So we didn't have, it wasn't digital work at that point. So that was my first introduction of working at Evenson Design Group. And then I started working on other projects there, and we developed this incredible synergy. We started going on meetings, and Stan was giving me a lot more responsibility and doing presentations with the clients, and we just had this incredible connection with each other, as well as like we were just acing the meetings. People just loved us. We were like the dynamic duo. And we started off our relationship very, very professionally, and then over time we just got to know each other more personally, and that developed into a relationship, and then finally marriage a number of years later.
Bingo.
When did you take on the record album covers? Is that during that same time?
Well, actually in 1975, that's when I started at A&M Records. And I left and I started working with all the major companies and doing album covers too, because they knew that I had worked at A&M. So for probably easily 25 years, I was doing album covers. I've done 150 of them over my time. I'm actually in the album cover Hall of Fame. I've done doing so many, so
yeah,
pretty cool.
Yeah. They also are part of the Labor Day artist tours at their home, and the opportunity to go and see all of their lifetime art, which was fascinating and wonderful. There was a group of like 3 or 4 of the Santa Barbara visual artists that had the opportunity to talk with you about your art. When did you start making the transition from designer to fine arts?
Back in about 2012, we were kind of having some stuck energy in our office, and so we're brainstorming ways that we might infuse the office with a little more excitement and energy. And so we created a project where everybody put in a word in a bowl, and then we picked a word, and whatever the word was, we gave the assignment for each designer to create a piece of art outside of normal design parameters. They had like several weeks to do the project, and it could be any medium that they wanted. And the word was connection. And so Stan developed an incredible piece, which is hanging in our home right now. And I did a painting, and I had not really painted much in my life. That was one thing that I hadn't done a lot of. And we didn't even have a lot of those materials at home. I was painting on an old scrap piece of illustration board, and that night I couldn't stop. Like something just like opened up and started flowing through me, and I couldn't stop painting. I was like, went to bed like 3 in the morning and produced about 6 paintings that night. And I said, okay, I'm on fire. I want to be doing this. And so it was kind of a transformative moment for me, and actually for both of us. And around that time, we had a friend who I was sharing this with, and she said, you know, I know someone who's a teacher that I think would be perfect for you and Stan to go see. So we went to see this man, Rasuli, who's out in the valley of Los Angeles, and we started taking workshops with him. And he really got us out of our heads and into our hearts. He really got us out of the designer mindset and into the fine artist mindset. And we were just really turned on and energized by that whole process. And then around 2014, we were just getting really burned out of the design business altogether. It had been building for quite some time, really since 2008 when everything crashed, and it really shifted our whole business and the way that we were doing business, and we were kind of disillusioned and ready for a change. And so we upended and sold half of what we owned, closed our business, and moved to Portland, Oregon to reinvent ourselves. And we started painting and started taking classes and workshops and really infusing our life with art and painting. And that's kind of how we transitioned. We kept a few clients to kind of help us bridge that gap, but that was the beginning of really shifting out of being designers. And we will always be designers, and there's still opportunities, as you know, helping out with different organizations here and there and personal projects, but our main
family.
love, and our family and friends, but our main love is really just fine art now.
And as designers, I think that you're a problem solver. And Rasuli really helped people, for us, getting, like she said, getting out of our heads and into our heart space, and actually designing. His assignments were just incredible. It's just like, go over to the next person's piece of art and scribble whatever you want to do for 10 minutes, and then walk back to your own, that someone's done that to yours, and that's your starting point. So just great assignments like that, or being blindfolded and actually do finger painting and just get it completely, like there's no problem to be solved here. Just get the feel of the paint on the end of your brush. So.
I think that we see that in your art currently as well. It is the feeling and the humor and everything that you put into it. So where does the inspiration come from? You're kind of touching on that, and that's a question that you wanted to respond to.
Yeah, I think for me it was, I've always liked surrealism and doing something dreamlike, but actually have a twist to it, and just like, you know, putting two normal things together, but by putting these two things that don't belong together, it creates something completely different. And that's kind of my influences, what I was raised with, how wacky Mad Magazine was, and loving the cartoon world, and so vintage stuff, and anything that has rust on it, I kind of just get attracted to.
I wrote down what you did for the legacy art promotion of your art, and a lot of it was unexpected, the humor that you like to put into your art. and the connection between present and future. You wanna expand on that?
Yeah, I love vintage, and sometimes I'll combine a contemporary idea, like I just worked on a painting for another show that I'm in right now, for Wings, and it's, I obviously have to show something with wings, and so I took the Pegasus, like the mobile sign, but instead of having mobile oil, which I didn't want to promote an oil company, put no mobile oil. And then I had 3 spaceships floating in the sky. And so I like to make environmental statements too with my work. I have a series on water, this natural resource that is not appreciated, and try to bring some appreciation to it by taking photographs that I took of water mains on the street that are about this size, and blowing it up, and it almost becomes the world, but the word water. So I love topography and how that gets involved in my work many times.
That's wonderful to hear, and we're going to talk about a couple of your art pieces
Okay.
soon, but would you like to respond
Sure,
to about
yeah.
your inspiration?
There's no question about it. My inspiration is nature itself, and I'm just drawn to. I started off doing landscapes and waterscapes, and I had a series of paintings called The Language of Water, which is really an abstract landscape, but mostly focusing on horizons and vast water. I think it's just not just that, but also wildlife painting, like the owl behind me, and some of the other paintings in the room. I'm also an abstract expressionist, so I kind of go back and forth between the design world and abstract expressionism, and then wildlife and abstract landscape. So I have a few genres of art that I move around from place to place, but I think in everything I do, there's an element of nature in it. So whether it's an insect or an elephant, or if it's waterways or fish in water or under seascapes, anything like that. Clouds, I love to paint the clouds. And so it's really the paradoxes of nature, the beauty of nature, the decay of nature, the life force of nature. I think those are my biggest inspirations.
And what about the process of your art? That's one area that you wanted to touch upon for both of you. And then we'll lead into your
Well,
art.
I think when I'm painting abstractly, I really don't think about anything. I just try to get in there and move the energy that's flowing through me and express it onto the canvas or onto paper. I really, really have a love for texture and depth. And so I try to create a lot of depth in my paintings with texture. I'm also in love with saturated jewel tones of color. So most of it's actually really a challenge for me to paint in black and white, or to go with a monochromatic palette, or a limited palette. And sometimes I feel like I should be stretching in those areas, but my natural tendency is to saturate, and I think that's just, it also comes to saturation, color, and the level of depth that I create in my abstract paintings. And I try to actually create some of that same kind of texture at least in the backgrounds, like this one behind me, of my wildlife paintings as well. So I think that's part of my process. And sometimes I get stuck and I have no idea where to go, and Stan will be behind me because we share a studio. He'll be behind me, but like, oh my God, stop! I love it. Don't do anything. And inside of me, something's just not working, and then I will mess it up and paint something, and in that process, I lose something that was working. But then I gain, and I have to keep going until the conversation the canvas and I are having together starts to wind down, and I'm asking the canvas, what else? And the canvas says, I think you're done. And maybe I come back with some other little details, but it's this relationship that we're having, this temporary relationship that we're having, and I really like that process. And I find that the paintings I do that are, I just completed a series that turned out to be really nice paintings, but they didn't feel as much a part of me. They felt a little bit more contrived because I was more, I don't know if intentional is the right word, but there was something about it where I didn't allow myself to be a little bit more spontaneous. And I think that's where my joy is when I can create something that is flowing through me more spontaneously.
I've taken master artists, David LaFell and Daniel Kern, and they both would say everyone gets stuck.
Right.
If there's you hit a block and they say, go through it, and that's what you did, to
Yes.
find the flow, the natural flow.
Yeah.
And I also hear about that you both paint from your heart, and so I think that's what the energy is when people come to see your artwork. Did you want to add on to that as far as your
Yeah,
process?
what's interesting is I've stopped saying to Tricia, stop, because it doesn't work. But I do say that, why don't you, if you're selling that painting, I think you could sell it for 12 times more, because there's 12 paintings underneath it. You know?
Very true.
And I know sometimes, like for instance, my rush hour painting where I've got birds on top of caterpillars, that wasn't my intention initially. It was just having caterpillars floating in the sky, which was a bizarre idea. And then it just wasn't enough. And so I started adding all these other elements. And so I do have feelings that it does grow and develop. And I do love abstract, and sometimes it's really great to just have the freedom for that, but I really haven't been pushing that. But sometimes I'll take just workshops to kind of free myself from that idea that I might have that's really specific, very opposite of what Tricia's doing. So, but anyway, yeah.
It's a good process.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the little lounge back here.
Lounge lizard,
Oh,
yeah.
lounge.
Yeah, that was actually an assignment for one of my painting classes up in Oregon. And it was a totally open assignment. And we had, in the painting class, we kind of built up to this. This was done in just 3.5 days. And so there was a time limit. We had to do color studies first and then actually create the canvas on a wall, and it turned into a whole gallery presentation. So, and I love painting in community. So we had probably 20 people in the class painting these huge paintings. And for me, I love to do the bizarre. It's just like, why not take a iguana, lizard, and then put a martini in front of him? What's he gonna do with that? It's just like, they don't belong together, but somehow it just makes people smile, and I do, and laugh, and a lot of my paintings do that, so.
Yes, especially the ones that you've selected for this exhibition.
Yeah.
So many people linger and want to go closer to your rush hour and then see all the things that you put into that painting, and they just start laughing and smiling.
That's one of my, I love that when I hear that.
Yeah.
For me, that's what I crack up at myself, is to say, well, what can I do? My mom was really into doing these Jello molds, and I was into vintage tin toys, and so I put those two images together, and the olive bomber didn't really get created until after. Just like, well, what would that little tin toy do? Well, he dropped little olives on that, Jello mold. So,
That's great.
my mind works a little strange.
It's totally wonderful, yes. So my last question then to both of you, what's next for you? Where are you thinking of going?
Well, right now, I'm kind of taking a hiatus from painting, briefly. I don't know if briefly is accurate, but I'm focusing on writing. I'm doing some writing. I'm in a collaborative process with another writer, a book on creativity. And so I'm kind of rechanneling some of my creative energy into a new medium. And then, it's not to say that I won't be painting now and then, but I'm not putting a lot of attention on having to paint, which feels really good. And I'm looking forward when the inspiration does come back to explore some new ways of expressing my art. I'm feeling the desire to go back into abstraction and maybe more abstract landscape specifically. And in the last year, I spent a lot of time exploring and experimenting, using a lot of different mediums and creating mixed media pieces, and I really enjoyed that process. So I think I want to bring some of those things back in and into whatever the outcome of abstract landscape might be. And it might include other materials. It certainly will include more than just acrylic paint. That much I know. You know.
It's exciting. I'm glad
Yeah.
that you're, what are you planning and what type of writing are you thinking?
I'm co-writing a book.
You are?
Yeah.
That's good. The topic,
Creativity.
creativity.
Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about it
Okay.
right now. 'Cause
Yes,
it's
that's great.
it's in the beginning stages and more to come on that.
Yes. I think we do take the journey with our art, and then right now I've been doing landscape, seascape, pastel, and now I'm leaning, finally going back 5 years ago to the still life oil and trying to really get the sophisticated setting for that. What's next for you?
Well, it just so happens today I find out that my knee surgery, knee replacement is going to actually happen next week rather than the first of the year. So all of a sudden I'm visualizing myself trying to get up that stairway up to our studio. And it seems a little overwhelming right now, but I have a painting in mind, and I did a solo trip probably 2 years ago that I went to my father's homestead in North Dakota.
Mm.
And I took this trip, and Tricia met me halfway to the trip. It was great. But the first part, I was just pulling out the side of the road and taking pictures of vintage signs. And so I have a whole pile of vintage signs that I'd love to incorporate into my artwork. So that's what's kind of percolating right now with me.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to add before, related to your art? What you want everybody to know?
Well, Tricia and I have had this amazing partnership. We've known each other for over 30 years and married for 28 years, and I couldn't ask for a better partner. We had a studio up in Oregon that we built because I used to paint the garage, and you can imagine how cold it can be sometimes. So I blow out the heater, the circuit board, because I got 2 heaters going on. And we built this 170 square foot studio.
Not very big.
Not very big, and as an artist, you're sometimes backing up to look at your painting, and we would both hit each other, just, so we almost thought, well, maybe we need these little beeper lights to backing up. Now we have a bigger studio, we have a big glass table in
Yes,
between
we
us,
do.
so we'll hit the glass table before we hit each other. But,
And be sure and go to Labor Day studio tours and find them, because you'll be doing it again next
Yeah.
year, right?
we've already signed up for it.
Yes, it's a wonderful setting,
Yeah.
and you see a lifetime of their artwork. Well, thank you for coming for this evening and the artist talk, and
Thank
it
you,
was
Jen.
so fun to sit and talk to
Thank you
friends
so much.
and artist friends. And be sure and visit Legacy Art Studio. We're here through December 30th, and there's so much activity that goes on here. Right now, we're gonna have our first Thursday reception and an anniversary celebration for Legacy Art Gallery from 8 to 10 with music. And we're open Wednesdays through Sundays, 3 to 8 p.m. And the artists are here to visit with you during first Thursdays and third Fridays. So in about another hour, there'll be a number of artists here to answer questions about their artwork. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
All right. That was a comment.